My name's Tim Borski. I grew up in Wisconsin. I live in the Florida Keys right now. I make most of my living as an artist, some of my living in royalties through fly tying or fly designs I have trademarked, and do some writing as well. My artwork has always been, I always spent a lot of time trying to make my work look like it took very little time. I'm not one who is very realistic in my painting styles. Tim Borski's style of artwork can be defined loosely as contemporary with just a little bit of abstract style to it. Of notice is my work tends to change every 6 months to a completely different style of work. However, anyone who knows any of my work would be able to recognize a piece from across the room anywhere they saw. I happen to be painting at this time in a bold, blocky red and black on a gallery wrap canvas, and that's subject to change as soon as I am finished with this particular style of painting, and I will know that because I'm becoming bored. I will move on to whatever else I like to do. Fortunately, as an artist, within reason, anything I paint, I have an audience for, and that's what separates me from people who do the same style their whole lives. My fly tying, like my artwork, tends to be a bit abstract. None of the patterns that I tie imitate anything specifically, but all of them tend to imitate a lot of different things vaguely, which puts them on the food chain, and I don't have to become too technical with what I'm doing. I like buggy patterns that move a bunch as opposed to sleek, realistic imitations that need to be manipulated. My flies, as in my artwork, are recognizable across the room. This is April of 2007, and April is the 20th year I've lived in the Florida Keys. April of 19th. I moved to the Florida Keys after a long, long winter to catch a bonefish. It was just bonefishing that I wanted. That's all I wanted to do. And I flew to Miami, and I caught my bonefish with a guide named Captain Bill Curtis, who was just a legend in the field. He worked hard, pulled my glasses off, asked me if they were polarized. I couldn't see anything. But one thing led to another, and I learned from Bill how to catch bonefish with a spinning rod. And one summer living in Miami, I caught a whole bunch of them, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to buy a cheap fly rod setup, a couple of flies, I'm going to catch one on fly, and then I'm going to sell it in a garage sale and go back to spinning gear, and I'll be able to tell people for the rest of my life, yes, I've caught one on a fly. Well, what happened was it was such a steep learning curve that it took several months to catch that first fish, and I finally did. I'll never forget it. Then, of course, I decided, hey, I want to do it again, which was the beginning of the end, as it were. And I started tying my own flies. And having an eye for artwork and having a fairly extensive fishing background from where I grew up, I knew almost immediately what I needed to do with a fly to have that fly behave in the way I needed it to behave. And that's in a nutshell. Before long, I met a person who owned a fly shop in the Florida Keys, and he saw my flies and my artwork, and he said, hey, Tim, come on down, let's fish tarpon one day and talk a little business. And in the process, he offered me a job managing his fly shop in Islamorada, and that gave me a vehicle to sit all day and paint and and tie flies. So I had a real quick learning curve there. A few years later, I decided that I was going to work on my own, and I moved to a little private island called Craig Key. I had virtually no business with art people. I sold stuff when I had to, and I fished 300 days a year for almost a dozen years. So in the process, just through osmosis, I learned a bunch about the field. I learned a bunch about the people who are in the field. I learned a bunch about the characters, the casting characters, from birds to flies to fish, which would have taken me a lifetime as opposed to a dozen quick years. So I'm very fortunate there. And here I am today. I have an audience for my flies, which I'm very grateful for, and I have an audience for my art, which I'm very grateful for.